Bullshit.
It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm Dave Mastovich of Massolutions, the world's only no bullshit marketing firm. I'm in the midst of a fantastic conversation with Mike Cherock, the CEO of AE Works. In the first episode, Mike talked about how impactful his 7 years in the military and on a submarine were from a leadership standpoint and a communication standpoint and a listening standpoint. I loved when he talked about how significant listening is to our personal and professional growth and the growth of any company. He then talked a lot about how he had been an entrepreneurial spirit, that after the military, he went to Penn State to get his architectural and engineering degree and his master's as well. While there, he started a couple of business, met his future wife, and the two of them have an entrepreneurial spirit. So he had a couple of businesses while he was in college, then actually had a retail business, which taught him a lot as well about leadership and communication. Then he worked to get his license so he then could jump and make the leap to AE Works. And in the last episode, he talked about the triple bottom line. And we're going to touch on that a little bit just to start episode 2. Mike, welcome to episode 2.
Thank you for having me.
We ended the last episode by triple bottom line. I gave that quick recap of everything else we talked about. Let's just touch on triple bottom line a little bit more from this standpoint. So you do triple bottom line, which is a model that you're committed to the social, environmental, and technical. And you said there's 3 parts: profit, social, and eco. And you walked through how the company does that. But you also did something that I always found interesting from the first time we met when you told me the story about your logo, because it sort of also kind of ties to the triple bottom line. Talk about your logo. It has meaning. It
does. Yeah. So when we went through this process of identifying the business model, and we're a B Corp or certified B Corp, so we also found an organization that can help certify us as a triple bottom line company. So you have to give a lot of, metrics and so forth that you have in the business, and then they verify you and B Corp, and they help tutor you because it's difficult running a triple bottom line company. We wanted to also brand. So we wanted to build this into every aspect of the company. And of course, one of the most visible pieces is our logo. So we went through an exercise. We used a local consultant here in Pittsburgh to help shepherd that and help develop the logo. They went through a series of workshops, and ultimately was created. We don't really have a name for this thing. I've heard different things, but it essentially looks like the yin and yang, but it has a third piece. And what it represents is the triple bottom line. So there's 3 pieces, right? So it's 3 different colors. So the 3 bottom lines are shown in the logo itself. It represents where we're from. It's Pittsburgh and the 3 rivers. So we found that to be very powerful. It's round, so it's a continuum, right? And the way that the logo is designed, much like the yin and yang, is it's perpetually in motion. So one's always feeding into the other, and there's 3 pieces, so they're all kind of feeding into each other. It creates, as the 3 are put together, it creates this center. And the center represents our core value, right? Our core values. That's ultimately our core values of leadership, integrity, and craftsmanship. I wrote down on a piece of paper on May 14th, 2007, when I founded the company. Those exist to this day. We use those. Everything is kind of emanated out of those. We created something last year called maxims that are the core values in actionable type things. Like maxim number 7 is embrace the suck. Right? That's how do if I'm going to enact it every day and the core values as an employee of AE Works, help me. So we say, okay, well, one of the things you can do to practice our core values and make them actionable is to embrace the suck. Lean into it. Build grit. And look at challenges as an opportunity. So that's an example. We have 10 maxims. And we wanted the logo to kind of capture that core value that is so important to the company. So that's the development of the logo. We have a story we created. It's on our website. People can go check that out, read about the story that kind of notes down, exactly, kind of with more specifics what the logo represents. But those are the main pieces.
Now, part of B2E marketing, which we talk a lot about business to employee marketing, is treating your employees just like you treat your other target markets. Talk about how you've infused these maxims the triple bottom line and the story behind the logo to an employee that starts next week, to an employee that's been there 3 years, to an employee that's been there since 2007?
So we have a number of processes inside the company that we utilize to do that, and we're always in a continuous improvement cycle, right? So we're always looking to kind of how to better that. So like one of the significant things for somebody starting is our onboarding process. So a number of years ago, I said, well, how do we, if we're talking about thinking broader, right? So we're not thinking about just profit. We're thinking about profit, social, eco as a business model. If you started AE Works, you're working in a company that has architects, engineers of all types, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers. Now you're working with people who are also builders. So we have construction managers. We have a project services group. So they're people who understand how to estimate projects and do construction. We have a security guy, right? We have a guy on staff who leads that effort, a guy by the name of Herb Brichta, who's an expert at breaking into buildings. So our mission evolved over time where not only we design, stunningly beautiful, highly functional buildings, but we design safer buildings. So you come to AE Works as a new employee, you're exposed to these different technical professionals, but you're also exposed to the marketer. You're exposed to the finance person. And I said, well, how can we help somebody think broader? And, while they're doing their kind of slice of the work that we have as part of our value proposition, they're aware of and learning about this company, right? Take our culture, manifest it in something real. So I took what I had in submarines, surprise, right? We had a submarine qual card. The reality is every submariner has to qualify submarines. If you don't, you're out. And in the process of qualifying submarines, you literally learn that submarine from fore to aft. So you learn everything about torpedo systems, and you learn about sonar systems, and you learn about the nuclear power plant. You learn about the mess, the chow hall. Right, it wasn't hall, mess decks, real small, but you learn about the kitchen. So you learn about all these systems and who does them. And what I found was fascinating about that experience was you're building relationships while you're doing it. And the process is simply a checkout. It's called a checkout. So I would take my submarine qual card and I'd walk up to a guy and I'd say, hey, my understanding is you're the guy that can sign off on torpedo systems. And he'd be like, yeah, that's me. I'm like, cool. Can I get a checkout? Yeah, sure. So he'd just start asking me questions. And I'd say, well, you need to go study this. And then when he felt that I knew enough about torpedo systems, he would sign my qual card. Then once I was done with all those checkouts, then I would go see the management. And on submarines, that we would call those like the engineering officer, the navigation officer. And ultimately, you ended up at the commanding officer, the skipper. And the skipper would give you a checkout. So he would ask you anything on the boat. And when he felt that you were comfortable, he signed your card and you got submarine warfare pin pinned to your chest. Okay, dolphins, we called them. So I'm like, well, why don't we just do that here? So we created a card. It's actually, the form factor is exactly the same size as a submarine qual card. I still have the submarine qual card from my days back on the USS Columbia. And so my group went together and literally created a qual card for AE Works, if you will. We call it the O card, the onboarding card. And when a staff member shows up, they're handed that card. And inside that card is every facet of the business. And then they go around and they meet people and they say, hey, you can talk to me about lighting systems in buildings. I can. All right, well, ask me some questions. And so they go through a process. And when that person thinks that they know enough, they sign off on it. And then ultimately, I meet as the captain of the USS AE Works, right? I sign that O card.
You're the skipper.
I'm the skipper. I sign that O card. When I feel that employee has exerted effort to understand AE Works as a company, has interfaced with all the various facets we have, I sign that card. So there's and then they don't get submarine warfare pin. They get an AE Works lapel pin and a key. And on that key, it's a glass key. It has our core values, and we say this is the key to unlock your potential. So that's one example of how we manifest in actionable ways what it is we believe in as a company.
Now, how many employees do you have?
40.
40. Okay. So when a new employee comes on, about how long does it take until they've kind of got through to get the card and the PIN?
By design, it's 3 months. Some people do it faster. Some people taking a little while.
Okay.
And what's interesting is like, they have this piece of paper and there's this kind of like cool nostalgic piece to it. But like literally we have one on our strategic plan to kind of update that because we're a company that has multiple offices and we're a company that's growing. So, that creates, it's not a submarine, right? You're not kind of contained underwater where you can just walk around. So we're trying to make it easier for tracking that and people being able to do their O cards and things like that. So, but yeah, about 3 months by design.
Really interesting. Mike Cherock of AE Works talking about the O card and what he learned and applied from his days on a submarine to B2E, business to employee marketing and communications, so that you're able to make sure that everybody understands the company. They understand the company's why. They understand the strategic goals and objectives and how they fit into those goals and objectives, what they individually can do. That's what B2E marketing is all about. That's what we push our clients to do here at Mass Solutions. So it's great to hear how Mike does it for AE Works. Mike, other than family members, do you have any mentors? And if so, who are they and how have they impacted you?
Boy, I have a number of mentors. I'm one of those people that seeks out. They might not know they're my mentor, right? But I seek them out. I mean, I've always believed the best. I read voraciously and I expose myself to as much material as possible. I'm in college right now. In fact, I mean, I'm always a lifelong learner.
What are you doing in college now?
I'm getting a business degree.
Okay,
my master's in business.
Okay, where are you taking?
Through Harvard's Extension School.
That's awesome.
So
how does that work?
Yeah. So, it's a lot of it's online. At first it just started, I wanted to take a course on organizational behavior. I wanted to take a course on accounting. So I did a lot of research and, there's a lot of good schools that are out there. I found personally that Harvard's Extension School was the best, just in terms of, who was teaching it, what the material was.
It's all online?
It is, but if you get involved, so after you take a number of classes, you get admitted to the degree, then you have to go to campus. So I'll go to campus twice this semester, in the fall, excuse me. And throughout, because now that I'm admitted, what I thought would just be a few courses ended up being so enjoyable and so rewarding, that I took a few more courses and then by then, like if you accomplish certain core requirements and achieve the certain academics, then they will admit you into the degree program. So I'm thinking, well, if I'm going to do this, I might as well get my degree, right? And what was cool about that is then once you get admitted as a student, then you can go to Harvard's campus and really participate, in the campus. And it's kind of cool. How many credits
will it end up being?
I'll end up having 48 credits. And it ranges from marketing management to, like right now I'm taking a class of computer science for business professionals. And it was really cool to understand because, I'm faced as a CEO with IT challenges all the time. What do we want to spend our money on? And how do we prepare for the future? So that class taught by a professor at Harvard called David Malin, who's phenomenal. He has one of the most popular computer science classes in the world. It's very, very informative. And it's been, everything I've learned I've taken into the business.
So back to the mentor. Sorry to
yeah.
deviate.
So yeah, no. I mean, it's I look at that as mentoring. To be quite honest with you, I mean, it's people transferring information, right? So I seek out what I want to learn, and find the people who can do that best. Uh-huh. On a daily basis, I'm involved in groups like Vistage. So I have some mentors in the group that I was in. Those folks who really taught me not just business, but also taught me what it was like to be a good dad. I have 2 young kids. I work a lot, and if I don't want to be just a good CEO and have a good business. I also want to be a good dad, and I don't want to I want to learn how to do that. So those mentors not only help me with business, but they help me with being a good father and a good husband. I have mentors. There was a gentleman back in 2012. I mentioned that date previously, where he came in and it was through a series of relationships. A guy by the name of Fred Sargent, who's a longtime, well-known business guy in Pittsburgh, who just was tremendous in helping me. Some of the mentors that I had in my youth when I was in submarines, I don't talk to anymore, but I bring up their names. I had a conversation with one of my staff members the other day that I was influenced by a gentleman named Lieutenant Buswell, who just gave me what I think are just pearls of wisdom. I carry around with me in terms of like, when you're working with somebody and you're being exposed to leadership, the opportunity to not learn what to do is just as powerful as learning what to do. And, and he gave me that perspective, based on a particular, situation that we were in. And I found that to be very powerful. So, yeah, I mean, I believe that mentors is, having mentors is absolutely essential to entrepreneurship. I think it's essential to really doing anything. I mean, I'm a strong believer in mentorship. And I think that, you don't have to go ask somebody to be a mentor. You just make them one.
I love the line about learning what not to do. I joke often that we all have to-do lists, and we have to have to not do lists as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, for sure.
Well, what's one of your biggest communication successes in your career? The goal is to kind of hear what you've led, how you've led through communication. So what's a communication success that you could tell that would help our audience?
Well, I think in terms of, navigating change, right? So in finding, starting a business in basement, growing it, there was a period of contraction, because nothing's a straight line. And, and you learn a lot through there. And what I found is that when the more confusing something gets, and what I mean by that is like every time you add a staff member, it gets more confusing. And I always tell people in my company, meetings are a sign of dysfunction. That's not a bad thing. Just remember why you're meeting. You're trying to become more functional. So make the meeting worthwhile. Don't meet just to meet. Just realize that if we're highly dysfunctional, what do we need? We need more meetings. You need better communication. And it's interesting to me how there's kind of a natural tendency that we have when things get chaotic to become less communicative. It's actually the reverse is needed. You need to become more communicative. So when I look at like 2012, I use that data a number of times. When I looked at periods of growth, where we sustained in our history 300% growth. We were on the Inc. 5000 list for a number of years. What I learned earlier on is I would amp up those communications. So, for example, in one period in our history, we had quarterly training meetings. We're 15 people. We had to work 30. I knew that we were going to go through this growth period. So what did we do? Well, we met every quarter for a day. And it's like, I can't get away from those projects. I got all these deadlines that, and it's true. Like, I understand. And I would sit around and say, hey, look, you have to be there. Like, plan around the day. So I gave as much days, as much advance, we kind of mapped them out for the whole year. We still do that. We still have a master calendar. Every year, I put a master calendar out at the end of the previous year that literally says, like, this is the day we're going to have the state of the company. Like for 2020, our staff will have that before the end of 2019. So you can plan to November in the following year. Okay, so that communication's coming and you need to plan around it. So these quarterly training meetings that we had, there would be a lot of stress, but then we would sit in these meetings and go through culture, projects that we're working on, and technical improvement. We did all kinds of team building exercises, and it got us through a period of a lot of change. And I look to those communications as, those are why we made it. Those are why we sustained growth. And now we're going through another period. We were around 30, 35 people for a number of years. That's a well-known inflection point in business in terms of growth. We're now breaking out of that. And the reason why we're doing that is that we've made some structural changes in the company and then amped up the communication, put into place like stay of the company, stay of the industry. All hands meeting is every other week. And then I look all the way down to like, what are we meeting on every week and what's being communicated? We use technology. I mean, Slack has been tremendous for us. I mean, I'm kind of a bit of a tech geek, and I ran into Slack when we implemented maybe a couple of years ago. Now it's the fastest adoption of any technology I've ever seen. And I have different channels. So I have, a fourth industrial revolution channel. I did a State of the Industry last year. I talked about the fourth industrial revolution, its impact on our industry and on our practice, and take that all the way down. If you're an architect, how does the fourth industrial revolution impact you? So I have a channel in Slack. We can put information in there and share that. So, I mean, communication is everything. It's everything. And it's rapidly changing. I mean, if you look at this podcast, right, that's a form of communication, for your organization and, and for people who want to learn. And I think that these channels that are rapidly evolving and how people are learning to be better engineers and better consultants and better, marketers and better everything, that part of my job is to keep them informed. Everybody in the company, keep them informed, and our clients. This is how you stay informed because it's rapidly evolving.
So now on the other side of that, though, it's the No BS show. So tell me when you were the BSer, you were the difficult employee, the tough boss, or when you could have communicated better. What did you do to fix it that we can help our audience to learn from you?
Yeah, so probably the biggest example I could come up with at the moment is something that just kind of gnaws at me. And I'm not a regret guy by nature. I mean, I'm like, well, I'm doing my best in the moment, so it is what it is, right? But there was a period where I got kind of obsessed with organizational design. And it's an element of business, right? You have to figure out like what management positions you need and all this other kind of stuff. The hierarchy, if you will, inside the company. And so I created, kind of this dual hierarchy with like a corporate and I, created these management positions called captains and positions, like associates and things like that. And it was a terrible communication. They never worked out. It was one of the things I look at and I go, okay, we could have done, from a communication perspective, a much better job at first defining what those were, why we're doing them, and then giving that to the staff and saying this is what we're going to do going forward. And quite honestly, it was just a little bit outside my wheelhouse at that time. It was a little too forward. So, entrepreneurs, if we're guilty, and we're guilty of a lot of things, we're guilty of thinking too far out. Uh-huh. Right? And so you're way out ahead and you're thinking, you're like, that sounds really good. In the echo chamber, that's my brain. This makes a lot of sense for the business. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to implement this organizational design. Well, everybody else in the company is like, I'm not really sure how that's relevant. Right now, like we're not that company. Sure, you need vision, you need to know where you're going, but you can't get too far out ahead. And in that instance, it was too far ahead. And I communicated it poorly. I didn't say that. Obviously, if I had thought that at the time, I wouldn't have done it. So, I look back and go, okay, we screwed up. And I took some time actually last year to address that issue and say, hey, that was an instance where I didn't communicate it very well. And, I wish, that I could go back and change some of those things, but I can't. So it leads to confusion, right? When you don't communicate well, people get confused, what the hell's going on, And I also think some of the general stuff, like we talked about the triple bottom line, and we talked about things. One of the things is entrepreneurs that we also have to be cognizant of, and it just kind of goes with the turf, in my opinion, is that we often speak from a vision perspective. But the reality is, which is where your staff are at, is that it's not as we say it is. There is a difference between reality and vision. There's a gap. And there's tension as a result of that gap. Uh-huh. And, that's where I say, like, it can become bullshit marketing, uh-huh. To use your term, where it's like, okay, well, you guys are marketing triple bottom line, but you're not really doing anything, which that means it's just bullshit, right? And the staff know that. They go, yeah, okay, well, a triple bottom line company, but the culture inside this company sucks. It's all about the bottom line, right? And that would be, so I'm mindful to make sure that we don't get too far out ahead in the message. And that's just from experience, that we're so far out ahead, it does just become bullshit. And I don't want that reputation. I don't want the company. I don't want my staff to endure that because that just sucks.
A couple of things that you're touching on. First thing is we as entrepreneurs, we have to set the vision. So then we're pushing this vision. And the reality is maybe 10% of the population has that type of strategic vision. Maybe another 20% can even kind of get strategic vision. And that is not by any means being arrogant or being negative, because there's 10% that can be so technically proficient, another 20% that kind of get the technical stuff. Then there's a bunch of people that can't do repetitive work. So I'm not acting like just the vision thing. I'm being arrogant saying we're great because we can do that. There's this whole other thing. It's just called life. But there's the first part that we're ahead with the vision. But the second part is that no matter, even when we do a good job of articulating the vision, and even when we're pushing to get to the vision with a clear strategy, most people struggle to get beyond the part that they do. So even if you're a great storyteller and you encapsulate your vision, the reality is good people that you care about and that are important to the company still struggle to see beyond just that part they do.
Absolutely. I mean, you're constantly working, like, one of my mentors said to me, Roger, he's like, your job is to take the vision and integrate it into every aspect of the business, right? You got to build it in so that people are aware of it. They're working on right now, but what they're working on, like he always says to me, every single staff member in the company needs to be able to say and understand, more importantly, how they connect to the customer. So, it could be somebody like the bookkeeper. Well, how does the bookkeeper impact the customer? And that's a big challenge. That gets lost very easily. And it's the work. It's the work of the entrepreneur to do that. I mean, that's part of the gig, and it's constantly moving target to some degree because the business is fluid. You're getting new customers. You add people. It scales. You change markets. Like we're working heavily in DC and growing the DC market. We're about to expand our office in DC. It's something we've had strategically in mind for many, 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 many years. And the sales and marketing team have been pushing in that direction for many, many, many years. Well, it's here now. And that's confusing to people. It can be confusing for our customers, not just internally. Well, are you going to DC? You're moving the company to DC? No. We're a Pittsburgh-based company that's expanding in DC. Why? Well, people have a lot of questions. And who are you hiring in DC? And what is it they're going to do? And where are you going to be located? And, what clients do you have there? Why? Are we going to get other? I mean, it's incredible, the amount of questions and curiosity that people have.
I have a line that says, work is a third of our lives, so we want to be able to talk about it. If we as leaders don't convey the story for the company, employees will make it up. And I'm not saying it to be mean to employees. They won't make it up in a duplicitous nature. They'll make it up because they want to fill that gap because it's a third of their life.
And they want to
talk about it, and they want to know.
They want to know. And if you don't tell them, absolutely, they'll make up their own story.
Now, here's one other piece of that. When we're on our games, entrepreneurs who have the vision, we love conveying that vision when we're on our games.
Yes.
But when we're drained from doing stuff that we shouldn't be doing, that is the part of our job that we actually then despise it sometimes. Do you agree? There's certain times where you go, damn it, why aren't they getting this? Well, it's because we haven't taken the time to do it. And sometimes it's they haven't taken the time to listen. But the reality is when we're on our games, I'm all about the vision of Mass Solutions. But whenever we're struggling and so forth, the people, and I'm not conveying it enough and they're not listening well enough, that's the part when I wake up going, I got to go do this again.
Look, Fred said to me a long time ago, Mr. Sargent, I love him. He's a great mentor. He said to me, look, it's easier to run Campbell's Soup than it is to run AE Works. I mean, the reality is that being the founder, entrepreneur, CEO of a small company is harder.
Absolutely.
It's harder. When you have large companies, and he ran a company of 3,000 people working for him, you have somebody that does everything.
Right.
And he said,
I used to joke at UPMC, my executive assistant had an administrative assistant who had a secretary.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just a law of numbers, right? It's economics. And so, in a small business, I talk to other entrepreneurs, other small business operators. I'm like, you gotta get over it. Like, if you can't handle that, then maybe you're in the wrong job. Okay. Like, look, happiness is, to sit and hang in the vision, space for too long, which we're all guilty of doing. Yeah, it feels good because you feel like your strength, you got your strength, and you're thinking about the future of the company, and your job is to do that, but it's not your only job. And yeah, we have these visions where, boy, I hope AE Works one day is large enough where I can just, sit back in my home office with my feet up on the desk and I can just dream of these great things. And that's something to work for. It probably won't happen. But yeah, that's cool to like think about it once in a while. Then you got to get to work.
Exactly. Well, it's summertime, so graduation parties are probably finally over. But what would you tell the young college grad, Mike Cherock, the young Mike Cherock, maybe right after the service or right after Penn State? Now that you've learned all the stuff you've learned, what would you tell that young Mike Cherock?
Just trust your instincts. Just trust your instincts. I mean, the reality is that you're never going to know enough. As an entrepreneur, your job is to hone your instincts. So you can work on them, right? You can work on them by, doing things, getting educated, listening to podcasts, reading books, talking to mentors, and honing your instincts. But you are choosing a life, and I've been a lifelong entrepreneur at this point, right? This business you ever heard of was AE Works, but when I look back, I go, oh, like my mom would tell you, oh, he was doing that when he was playing with his Matchbox cards and selling them to his buddies. I'd buy him a Matchbox, car, or a little car to play with, little toy, and I'd turn around and sell them. And she said, why the hell did you do that? So we make money on it. Right? And I went and bought a radio, an FM modulator, and put it in my mom's Dodge Charger, right? Just that, over time, what you're doing is, right, you're engaging with people through transactions, and you're building up skill sets, and you're honing your instincts. Because what I found at operating a business at, 40 people as compared to a business at, in my basement, as compared to working for somebody earlier on and having these other businesses in different industries, is that the amount of data, the same kind of situation that you'll face in any of those businesses or any phase of your career, the amount of data that's available to you changes. And the speed with which you need to make a decision changes. I mean, the fact of the matter is that right where I'm at right now in my career, running AE Works, leading AE Works as a 40-person company who has to work to grow exponentially, fortunately, and build and become an even bigger, more, have more impact as a firm. That I don't get the data like I used to get. I have to rely on my gut. I have to. Otherwise, I'll freeze. It'll take too long to make a decision. And the reality is when I look back when I was a kid, I could have moved a lot faster. I probably would have made the same decision if I would have just trusted my instincts at that moment, right? Be more fearless. The engineer part of me, says, well, I'm going to do the calculations, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to do that and I'm going to mitigate the risk, even though by nature, there's part of me that says like, just jump. I think be a little more fearless, and take the risks, because if I would have done that younger in life, I think I would be much further ahead as an entrepreneur today.
Great advice. Mike Cherock, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was awesome.
And thanks for listening to another episode of the No BS Marketing Show, recorded in our studios in bold, beautiful downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions, no BS.